I was caught cheating when he pulled up next to us at a red light. Karma came fast and cold.
Husband caught me with affair. He was next to us at the red light. Karma got me, I guess. I experienced the literal meaning of karma slaps hard and not in a good way. I'm broke, I've ruined my marriage, and I got caught in the absolute worst way. Some backstory so you understand. My name is Alicia, and I am a 35-year-old woman. I'm married to Dave, a 36-year-old man. We live in the United States and have been married for about 6 years. Dave and I met in college, and it felt like destiny brought us together. He was charming, with a smile that could light up a room, and I was totally smitten. We hit it off right away, spending all our time together, laughing, studying, and just enjoying each other's company. After we graduated, we moved to the city and started building our lives. But somewhere along the way, things started to change. Life got real, you know? We got caught up in work, bills, and all the other stuff that comes with being adults. Before we knew it, we were drifting apart without even realizing it. I started feeling lonely and lost, craving something more. And then I met this guy who made me feel alive again, even if it was just for a moment. Looking back, I know it was a mistake. But in that moment, it felt like the only way to break free from the emptiness I was feeling. I worked at a boutique, and it was an absolute blast. Sure, I didn't rake in as much dough as Dave, but it gave me some extra cash to treat myself. Plus, being surrounded by trendy clothes and friendly coworkers made every day feel like a party. Meanwhile, Dave was always swamped with work. As a big shot at his company, he made the big bucks but barely had time to breathe. He was constantly dashing from one meeting to another, trying to keep up with his job. I respected his hustle, but it meant we didn't get to hang out as much as I'd like. Dave made a lot of money, almost 10 times what I made, and so he took care of most of the bills. He handled the rent, utilities, and all that grown-up stuff. My job left me with a bit more spending money for treats like new shoes or a girls' night out. Dave gave me money, of course, but I didn't want to stay at home and be bored all day, so I picked up my job. I always wished Dave could kick back more often, but I knew his job was important. And when we did get a chance to chill together, whether it was a cozy night in or a spontaneous date night, it reminded me that love beats dollars any day well until I met Richard. While working at the boutique, I met Richard on his first day as a new guy on the team. Right off the bat, he brought this vibe that just drew people in. Richard had this way about him, friendly, upbeat, and always with a smile plastered on his face. What really made Richard stand out was his fashion sense. He just knew what looked good on people. Whether it was finding the perfect pair of jeans or a killer dress, he had this knack for picking out stuff that made everyone look and feel awesome. It was like he had this magic touch when it came to clothes. Pretty soon, word got out about Richard, and customers started flocking to the boutique. They couldn't get enough of his style tips and friendly demeanor. It was like he was the main attraction, pulling in crowds left and right. Seeing him work his magic, I couldn't help but be impressed by his talent and how effortlessly he connected with people. As days passed, I noticed Richard paying more attention to me. He'd bring me coffee, take a moment to chat, and really listen when I talked. It was nice, having someone show genuine interest in me. What really caught my attention was how Richard started complimenting my clothes. Coming from him, it meant a lot. He had this keen eye for fashion, so if he said I looked good, I knew I was rocking it. It made me feel confident and appreciated, especially in a place where style was everything. I couldn't deny that I enjoyed the attention from Richard. Sure, I was married, but it felt good to have someone notice me, to make me feel special. And Richard was just so friendly and easy to talk to. It was hard not to be drawn to him. Of course, not everyone in the boutique was thrilled about our growing closeness. I could feel the envy from the other sales associates and even some of the customers. But I tried not to let it bother me. I knew where my heart belonged, even if Richard's attention was a tempting distraction. As Richard's attention continued, I found myself enjoying it more and more. Despite being married, I couldn't deny the thrill of someone noticing me, making me feel special in a way that I hadn't felt in a long time. I convinced myself that there was nothing wrong with enjoying the attention. After all, it was just harmless flirting, right? I reassured myself that Richard knew I was married, so there was no way he would cross any lines. I told myself that I was overthinking it, that Richard just wanted to be friends and nothing more. And deep down, I wanted to believe it. As Richard and I grew closer, We exchanged personal numbers and started talking outside of work. It felt exciting, having someone to share my thoughts and feelings with outside of the office. But at the same time, there was a nagging voice in the back of my mind, warning me to tread carefully. Of course, you already know how it goes. I ignored the voice. As Richard and I continued talking, our conversations started to cross boundaries. We'd flirt shamelessly, yet somehow managed to play it off as innocent banter. It was thrilling and dangerous all at once. What made it even more enticing was discovering how much we had in common. We shared similar interests, laughed at the same jokes, and found ourselves drawn to each other in ways I hadn't anticipated. Then, one day, Richard suggested we hang out at his place to watch a movie. Without hesitation, I agreed. His apartment was modest compared to the spacious house Dave and I owned, but I didn't mind. I didn't want to risk inviting Richard over to our place with its security cameras and nosy neighbors. Our neighborhood may have been quiet, but I knew gossip traveled fast. We settled in with a bowl of popcorn, and I found myself enjoying the simple pleasure of watching a movie with Richard. I couldn't remember the last time I had done this with Dave. Richard and I laughed, we cried, and we shared our thoughts on the film with an openness that felt liberating. But as the night went on, things started to feel different. Our jokes got a little flirtier, our touches lingered a bit longer, and I couldn't ignore the chemistry between us. It was exciting, it was scary, and I should have stopped, but I didn't. I knew I should have put a stop to it, but I couldn't resist the pull. Richard and I crossed a line, we had sex, and I cheated on Dave. He was away, as usual, closing some big deal, and I didn't rush home in the morning. The guilt weighed heavy on me, but I found myself blaming Dave. If he had been around more, maybe I wouldn't have strayed. It was a mess of emotions for me, guilt, regret, and anger all tangled up together. I knew what I did was wrong, but part of me couldn't help but feel justified. Dave was always buried in work, and he left me feeling lonely and neglected. In my mind, I convinced myself that I deserved some happiness, even if it came at the expense of my marriage. But deep down, I knew there was no excuse for what I did. I betrayed Dave's trust, and that was something I couldn't take back. As the reality of my actions sank in, I couldn't help but wonder how I had let things spiral out of control. If only I had been stronger, if only I had resisted the temptation, maybe things wouldn't have ended up like this. But it was too late for regrets now. The damage was done, and I had to live with the consequences of my actions. There was no way I could bring myself to tell Dave that I had cheated on him. He'd drop me like a hot potato if he found out. I had to keep it hidden, no matter what. I made up my mind that I wouldn't continue my fling with Richard, but I also couldn't bear the thought of Dave leaving me. Despite our distance and his constant work commitments, I still loved him. He was the same guy I fell head over heels for back in college, driven, ambitious, and with a heart of gold. Richard could see the guilt written all over my face, and he tried to reassure me that I hadn't done anything wrong. Deep down, I knew he was lying, but his smooth talk and charm made it hard to resist. I knew I was being played, but Richard had a way of making me believe anything he said. If he told me the sky was green, I'd probably believe him. He was just that convincing. I got ready and headed home, trying to clear my head. Richard's words kept replaying in my mind. He said it wasn't my fault, and I wanted to believe him so badly. Dave still wasn't back, but I expected that. He said he'd be home the next day. I called in sick to work and decided to spend the day sleeping, hoping it would help me shake off the guilt and confusion. To avoid Richard's tempting presence, I thought about quitting my job. I mulled it over for hours, even after waking up from my nap. But something kept nagging at me. Quitting felt like giving up. I told myself that I would go to work the next few days and hope things wouldn't be too awkward. If they were awkward, I would quit, but if they weren't, I'd continue. I honestly thought it would be awkward, but Richard kept pouring on the charm, bringing me coffee, helping with sales, and showering me with compliments. It made me feel weak, like I was failing all over again. At that moment, I made a choice. I decided to go for what I wanted with Richard, no matter what. I convinced myself that I could keep it all hidden from Dave. He would never even meet Richard, and Dave was talking about working less, so he'd be around more. By that time, once Dave was available more, I would drop Richard and work on my marriage with him. I thought I could have the best of both worlds. But looking back, I see how wrong I was. I was playing with fire, and it was only a matter of time before I got burned. And that's how my secret affair with Richard carried on. We'd wait until the end of our shifts, then sneak off to his place. I even ditched driving to work, leaving my car at home so Richard and I could ride together. It was thrilling, and I couldn't get enough of it. I still loved Dave, I really did. But Richard's attention was like a drug, addictive and irresistible. It made me feel wanted in a way I hadn't felt in ages, and I savored every moment of it. Dave was still as busy as ever, hardly ever home. But I didn't mind anymore, not when I had Richard to keep me company. I stopped caring whether Dave was around or not. As long as Richard was there, I was content. Deep down, I knew Richard didn't love me either. I knew it was only a matter of time before he got bored and moved on. But I pushed those thoughts aside, choosing to deal with them when the time came. Because I was happy to bask in the attention and affection Richard showered on me. Funny enough, I knew Richard had a girlfriend too, but they didn't live together. I had seen her pictures and their text messages on his phone. But I couldn't bring myself to complain or confront him about it because, well, I was married. Dave loved me deeply, and I felt guilty for betraying him. But I was too caught up in the excitement of being with Richard to care that what I was doing was wrong. It was selfish, I know, but I couldn't seem to stop myself. At one point, I got really paranoid. I started thinking if I was sneaking around behind Dave's back, maybe he was too. I checked his phone over and over, searching for any signs of cheating. I even went as far as installing a keylogger on his phone. But there was nothing there. Dave wasn't cheating on me. He was just working his butt off. And it was really paying off. Dave was bringing in serious cash. We were living in this massive 7-bedroom house with all the bells and whistles, a home theater, a man cave, even a swimming pool. We had a fleet of cars, all thanks to Dave's hard work. We also had a maid and a gardener who came by every few days, but they didn't live with us. That was my decision. It wasn't because I looked down on them or anything like that. In fact, I came from a really humble background. At one point, Dave even had to cover my college fees, believe it or not. I just preferred to keep things private and personal. We hadn't started a family yet, but that was a conscious decision we made together. We both agreed to wait a few more years, maybe until I was around 38 or 39. Dave wanted to be a hands-on dad, but he knew he was too busy with work right now to give that kind of attention to our kids. So we decided to hold off until he could settle into a more relaxed role and be there for them. At one point, Dave almost caught me red-handed. See, I had this habit of crashing at Richard's place when Dave was away. Why spend the night alone when I could hang out with Richard? That was our mindset. So it became kind of routine for me to stay over at his place, especially if I had the next day off work. One day after work, Richard and I headed to his house as usual. But a few hours later, I got a call from Dave saying he was back home and asking where I was. I was genuinely caught off guard because he hadn't mentioned anything about coming home early. He said it was a spur-of-the-moment decision and that he missed me. I had to bolt home, and let me tell you, public transport was not on my side, especially since I'd stopped using our cars. When I finally got home, I had to come up with some excuse. I told Dave I had gone out for a bit because I was bored at home, and surprisingly, he bought it. He even seemed sympathetic, which just made me feel even more guilty. After that close call, Dave started asking questions. He wondered why I stopped using the cars to go to work. I made up some story about wanting to feel like a regular person and not wanting my coworkers, who actually needed the job, to think I was trying to show off. It was a lame excuse, but Dave seemed to buy it. My blood turned to ice and I was frozen in place like a deer caught in headlights. Richard must have noticed my sudden silence and followed my gaze to the Tesla. The look on my face must have given it all away because he frowned in concern. Finally, the light changed to green, and Dave started to drive away. But before he could leave, he continued recording and turned to Richard, asking, "Do you know she's married?" It was clear he was struggling to contain his anger. After questioning Richard, he drove off, leaving me to face the consequences alone. Richard glanced at me, clearly taken aback by the sudden turn of events. I could see the gears turning in his head as he processed what had just happened. He knew I was fucked. No, Richard could sense that going to his place was out of the question after what had just happened. He offered to drop me off at home, but I knew that wasn't a good idea. Dave could be unpredictable when he was angry, and I needed to give him some space to cool down before I could even attempt to talk things out with him. So I asked Richard to take me to my sister's. She lived close by and was great with advice, being a therapist and all. Richard agreed and left me at her doorstep before driving off. I tried calling Dave, but he didn't pick up. I could practically feel his anger through the phone. At my sister's, I spilled everything: the affair, the guilt, the loneliness. She couldn't wrap her head around why I'd cheat on someone as perfect as Dave. He was, in her eyes, the ultimate catch-good-looking, successful, and kind-hearted. But I felt distant from him, lost in our marriage as he buried himself in work. Richard's attention was a temporary escape from the emptiness at home. My sister said I should have talked to Dave instead of cheating. I sarcastically brushed off her suggestion, pointing out that it was too late for that and that Dave had just caught me kissing another guy at a red light. I spent a few hours at my sister's, cooling off and trying to gather my thoughts. She whipped up some food, and her comforting presence helped ease my nerves. She even offered to come back home with me if I was too scared. But I reassured her that Dave, despite his anger, would never resort to violence. That just wasn't his style. After some time, I still couldn't reach Dave on the phone, but I decided to take a chance and head back home. As I approached the house, I noticed my belongings strewn across the porch. Dave had wasted no time in tossing them out. I knocked on the door, hoping to reason with him, but Dave was resolute. He claimed he had helped me gather my things and was kicking me out of the house. I pleaded with him, begging for a chance to talk things through and apologizing profusely. But Dave wouldn't budge. He insisted on me leaving, but at least he hadn't thrown my stuff out onto the street. Dave explained that he didn't want my belongings to be stolen, considering they were expensive. It was clear he was hurt and angry, and there was no convincing him otherwise. Dave's words hit me like a punch to the gut. No matter what excuses or explanations I tried to throw at him, he wouldn't listen. I pleaded with him, telling him that the affair was just a result of my loneliness, that it meant nothing serious. I promised I was planning to end things with Richard, but Dave saw right through my words. He was fed up with my excuses, calling them bullshit, and stormed back into the house, leaving me standing there, shattered and alone. His harsh words cut deep, accusing me of distancing myself from him for a reason he now understood all too well. Dave declared that we were definitely heading for divorce, and there was no chance of salvaging our marriage. I desperately suggested couples counseling with my sister, but he only laughed, dismissing the idea as futile. It was clear that he had made up his mind, and there was nothing I could say or do to change it. With a heavy heart, I gathered my belongings and called for an Uber. Dave's parting words stung even more as he informed me that he had withdrawn his share of the money from our joint account. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but deep down I knew I couldn't argue with him. The truth was, Dave was the main breadwinner, earning nearly 10 times more than I did. He had always been financially savvy, diligently saving his earnings, while I, on the other hand, tended to spend frivolously on things I enjoyed. I had grown accustomed to Dave taking care of our finances, never bothering to save much myself. Now that I was faced with the consequences of my carelessness, I couldn't help but regret my past decisions. With nowhere else to turn, I considered my options. My parents lived in another state, and I couldn't burden them with my troubles. That left me with only two choices: my sister or Richard. Both seemed like precarious options, each with its own set of complications and uncertainties. But in that moment of desperation, I had no other choice but to reach out to them for help. On one hand, my sister had this constant need to fix everything, and it grated on my nerves. She just couldn't get that some things were beyond fixing, that some wounds were too deep. And then on the other hand, there was Richard, the guy who got me into this mess. If I wanted any shot at fixing things with Dave, I couldn't be anywhere near Richard. But with no money for a hotel and nowhere else to go, I reluctantly decided to give Richard a shot. Staying with my sister was risky. Her husband and kids might not be too happy about me crashing at their place out of the blue. So, swallowing my pride, I called Richard. But before I could even explain, he shut me down, saying he wasn't interested in us anymore. He'd decided to work things out with his girlfriend, leaving me stranded with nowhere to go. He even hung up before I could curse him out, the bastard. I was truly alone in this mess. It was beyond frustrating. Richard had left me high and dry in a mess he played a part in creating. With nowhere else to turn, I realized my only options were crashing at my sister's or facing the grim reality of a homeless shelter. And there was no way I was going down that road. Summoning what was left of my pride, I called my sister and poured out everything. To my surprise, she was more than willing to lend a helping hand. An Uber took me away to her place, where she greeted me with open arms. She rustled up some food once again and offered me a place to crash for the night. I was immensely relieved and grateful for her kindness. I had half expected her to turn me away. I dozed off for a bit, hoping to escape the mess for a moment. But when I woke up, my sister showed me this video Dave had sent her. It hit me like a ton of bricks. There was Richard, leaning in for a kiss in the car. And then afterwards, Dave's voice could be heard asking Richard if he knew I was married. It was pretty damn obvious what Dave was trying to show. I was floored. My sister explained that Dave had reached out to her, saying he wanted out of the marriage and wasn't interested in fixing things, despite her efforts to talk some sense into him and suggest counseling. Realizing the seriousness of the situation, my sister offered to hook me up with a lawyer she knew. But she warned me not to get my hopes up. The chances of getting anything from Dave were slim to none. I felt completely screwed, to be honest. I've made up my mind to wait for the lawyer's advice, though I'm not getting my hopes up too high. Dave's got solid video proof of me cheating, and that puts him in a pretty strong position. On top of that, the house is in his name, and there's even a prenup in place. Dave's always been the one bringing in the big bucks, and he's always been careful to protect his assets, hence the prenup. So realistically, the chances of me walking away with anything from this marriage are slim to none. But hey, I'll take whatever I can get. It's better than nothing. I guess karma really came back to bite me in the worst way possible. They weren't kidding when they said karma is a bitch. It sure slapped me hard. What hurts the most is that Richard, the jerk who helped me create this mess, won't face any consequences. It's all on me. But I refuse to let him off the hook that easily. I'll dig around, maybe find out who his girlfriend is, and make sure she knows the truth. I've got evidence on my phone that Richard's been cheating on her, and I won't hesitate to send it her way. I'm not going down alone in this mess. Either way, let this be a lesson. Cheating never pays off. It's just not worth it. Husband started sleeping with our neighbor because he found out about my affair. Hello, Reddit. I am a newcomer here. I've always heard of this app, but I've never really used it. This is my first time posting here, and I only created an account a few weeks ago. My friend recommended it as she thought my story would be a good one to share, as people might learn a lesson from it. So here goes. I cheated on my husband, and so he cheated back with our neighbor. And not only that, but I am also probably going to lose everything in the divorce. Now I know you might be saying, oh, you deserve it and stuff like that. But to be honest, I did not come here to be shamed. I know what I did was wrong, and I have come to terms with it a long time ago. I do not need anybody reminding me of my wrongs and of what I have done. I know I was wrong, and I know that I am probably going to suffer over it for the rest of my life, so please do not come here saying that. I am just going to share my story so somebody might actually learn a lesson from it. My name is Serena, and I am a 29-year-old woman. I am married to Stanley, a 30-year-old man, and we have been married for 5 years. Or rather, I should say we were married for 5 years, as we are getting a divorce now. Stanley and I live in the United States, and we don't have any kids. We were planning on having some when we were in our mid-30s. Stanley and I met in college. I remember stepping into the packed lecture hall on the first day of my sophomore year at university. My heart was racing with excitement and nerves. I asked if I could sit there, and he accepted. As I settled into the seat, we exchanged introductions. His name was Stanley, studying economics like me. We bonded over shared complaints about early classes and love for coffee. As the lecture began, I couldn't help stealing glances at Stanley. There was something about him that intrigued me, and we quickly became friends, studying together and hanging out on campus. As time passed, I realized I was falling for Stanley. He was kind, funny, and always there for me. Looking back, that first day in the lecture hall was just the beginning of our journey together. And I'm grateful for the chance encounter that brought him into my life. I will never regret meeting Stanley. He is always going to hold a special place in my heart as he gave me some of the happiest memories of my life. I cursed everything, and I blame myself solely for it. If not for the fact that I had cheated on him, he would have never cheated on me with our neighbor. In the blink of an eye, Stanley and I went from dating to practically living together. Stanley was from a wealthy family, and he spoiled me rotten. He handled the bills and treated me like a queen, even before we tied the knot. Then, out of the blue, Stanley proposed, and our wedding was straight out of a storybook fancy venue, flowers everywhere, the whole 9 yards. His parents insisted on a prenup. They liked me, and they were very friendly to me, but they were adamant on me signing a prenup. I didn't think much of it back then, but looking back, that prenup was like a secret safety net for Stanley. Who knew a piece of paper could be such a game changer? As the years rolled by after we tied the knot, Stanley's dad retired, passing the role of CEO to Stanley. Suddenly, Stanley's schedule was jam-packed, like he had a dozen plates spinning at once. He was constantly on the move, jetting off to meetings, conferences, and sales pitches faster than you could say busy bee. At first, I didn't mind. It meant I could be a stay-at-home wife without a care in the world. Stanley took care of everything, making sure money was never an issue. I never punched a time clock and had never worked since the day I tossed my graduation cap. But as time passed, that big, empty house started feeling less like home and more like a deserted island. Loneliness crept in like an unwanted guest, reminding me that no amount of cash could fill the void of companionship. I started missing Stanley more and more. I knew I should have talked to him about it, but I kept it all bottled up inside. After all, he was busting his butt to provide for us. Complaining would have felt ungrateful, so I kept quiet. One day, I headed to the grocery store just a few blocks away. I didn't bother taking the car since I only needed a few things. While browsing the sweets aisle, I've got a bit of a sweet tooth, especially for chocolate, I literally bumped into the most handsome guy I'd ever seen. Now, let me tell you, my husband Stanley is a total heartthrob. But this guy was something else too. He kindly helped me reach for an item on the shelf and struck up a conversation. Jeremy, that was his name, was incredibly friendly and easy to talk to. I found myself enjoying the attention, soaking up every moment of our chat. He lived nearby, though not in our immediate neighborhood. At some point, it hit me like a ton of bricks that I was married, and what I was doing felt all kinds of wrong. I made up an excuse to leave, but Jeremy insisted on dropping me home. Jeremy insisted on accompanying me home, and when we reached the checkout counter, he insisted on paying for my groceries. I couldn't help but blush at his gesture. It was flattering to feel noticed and appreciated, especially after almost 5 years of marriage. I knew I wasn't wearing my wedding ring, so Jeremy probably didn't realize I was married. Feeling conflicted, I knew I should tell Jeremy about my marital status, but the words stuck in my throat. Maybe I was overthinking things. Perhaps Jeremy was just being friendly, and mentioning my marriage would only make things awkward. So I decided to go with the flow and let the moment unfold naturally. Jeremy dropped me off at home, and as we said our goodbyes, Jeremy asked for my number. And without thinking, I gave it to him. Deep down, I knew it was a mistake, but in that moment, I couldn't bring myself to refuse him. Jeremy even complimented the house. I felt a pang of guilt and quickly deflected, telling him that my parents were wealthy, which is why I could afford such a nice place. He seemed to buy it and even joked about me being a trust fund kid. Little did he know, the house actually belonged to my husband. Jeremy drove away, leaving me standing at the gate of my house. I couldn't help but feel a surge of happiness tinged with guilt. It had been a long time since I connected with someone outside of my marriage, and Jeremy's attention had filled a void I hadn't realized was there. Loneliness had become my constant companion, a shadow that followed me wherever I went. But for a brief moment, talking to Jeremy made me forget about that emptiness. Yet, deep down, I knew that what I was doing was wrong. I was treading dangerous territory, teetering on the edge of crossing boundaries that should never be crossed. I knew I was playing with fire, but in that moment I didn't care. The rush of excitement and validation that Jeremy's attention brought me was intoxicating, drowning out the voice of reason in my head. I couldn't shake the feeling of guilt gnawing at my conscience, but I pushed it aside, burying it beneath layers of denial. It was easier to blame my husband for my indiscretions, to shift the responsibility onto his shoulders. If he wasn't always traveling, leaving me alone for weeks on end, then perhaps I wouldn't have given Jeremy my number. It was a convenient excuse, a way to absolve myself of any wrongdoing. But deep down, I knew the truth. My actions were my own, and no amount of rationalization could change that fact. I was walking a dangerous path, and I feared where it might lead me. Yet, in that moment, I was willing to ignore the warning signs, to chase after the fleeting thrill of attention and validation. Little did I know it was a path that would lead to consequences far greater than I could have ever imagined. Jeremy and I hit it off right from the start. We could talk for hours without even realizing how much time had passed. We found out we had a ton in common, so conversations flowed like a breeze. Jeremy's funny and charming, and he had me laughing all the time. I knew I was getting in deep with Jeremy, but I couldn't help myself. Our talks felt like a breath of fresh air in my lonely life. It was like I was in too deep to even try to back out. Despite knowing it was risky, I kept diving headfirst into our friendship, unable to resist the pull of his company. As time went on, Jeremy started coming over to the house when my husband was away. It started innocently enough, with him dropping by for a chat or to help out with something around the house. But as our friendship deepened, so did his visits. It became a regular occurrence, his presence filling the empty spaces left by my husband's absence. Keeping up the facade became increasingly challenging. I had to hide any trace of my marriage whenever Jeremy came over. To him, I was a single woman with wealthy parents, living alone in a nice house. In reality, I was a married woman, and my husband's presence loomed large even in his absence. I found myself constantly tidying up, hiding wedding photos and mementos, and erasing any evidence of my husband's existence before Jeremy arrived. It felt like living a double life. Hiding everything away became a routine, albeit a challenging one. I did my best to conceal any signs of my marriage from Jeremy's prying eyes. But one fateful night, as we settled in for a movie marathon, I found myself crossing a line I had sworn never to cross. It started innocently enough, with us cuddling on the couch during Netflix and chill. But as the night wore on and the movie's glow filled the room, things took a turn. Before I knew it, we were tangled up in each other's arms, our kisses growing more passionate and desperate with each passing moment. In a desperate bid to conceal the truth, I led Jeremy to the guest bedroom, pretending it was my own. It was the only way to keep the illusion intact, to avoid the inevitable questions and suspicions that would arise if he saw traces of my husband in our matrimonial bedroom. So I would take some stuff from our matrimonial bedroom and put them in the guest bedroom and pretend as if the guest bedroom was my room. So I led Jeremy to the guest bedroom and we had sex. The morning after was like waking up from a nightmare. I couldn't believe what I'd done. Cheating on my husband felt like a punch to the gut. I wanted to kick Jeremy out, to come clean, but I was paralyzed with fear. Then Jeremy walked in with breakfast in hand. The sight of him, so caring and attentive, made my heart ache with conflicting emotions. I wanted to kick him out, to confess everything and face the consequences. But as he set the tray down beside me, his eyes full of warmth and affection, I knew I couldn't bring myself to do it. Jeremy's gestures were so romantic, so genuine, that the words stuck in my throat. How could I shatter the illusion of perfection he saw in me? How could I tell him the truth, knowing it would destroy everything we had? So I pushed the guilt aside, buried it beneath layers of denial, and allowed myself to pretend as if everything was all right. Looking back, I can't believe how I convinced myself that what I was doing was okay. I mean, deep down, I knew it was wrong, but I somehow managed to gaslight myself into thinking I could get away with it. Looking back now, it's clear as day that was a big lie I was telling myself. But back then, I guess I was just naive. Jeremy and I kept up our secret rendezvous whenever my husband was away. It became routine. Either he'd come over or I'd sneak off to his place. We were like any other dating couple, except for the fact that I was hiding a huge secret. I was married. It felt like living a double life, and the guilt gnawed at me constantly, but I was too deep in to turn back. As time passed, the divide between my husband and me became more pronounced. He started to notice the growing distance between us, the subtle shifts in our dynamic that I had tried so hard to conceal. Despite his efforts to bridge the gap, to overcompensate for what was missing, I couldn't shake the feeling of being emotionally disconnected from him. At first, I brushed off his attempts, telling myself that it was just a phase, a rough patch we needed to work through. But deep down, I knew the truth. The truth that our relationship had been slowly unraveling long before Jeremy entered the picture. His presence only served to highlight the cracks in our marriage, the flaws and shortcomings that I had been trying to ignore for so long. As my husband's efforts to reconnect grew more desperate, I found myself retreating further into myself, building walls to keep him out. It wasn't intentional, but the more I tried to distance myself from Jeremy, the more I pushed my husband away in the process. It was a vicious cycle, one that I felt powerless to break free from. Despite my best efforts to maintain the facade of a happy marriage, the truth was impossible to ignore. The gap between us had grown too wide, and no amount of overcompensation could bridge the divide. And as I watched my husband struggle to hold on to something that was slipping through his fingers, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of guilt for the role I played in pushing him away. The weight of guilt pressed down on me like a ton of bricks. I couldn't escape the overwhelming feeling that everything was my fault, that I had single-handedly driven a wedge between my husband and me. But deep down, I knew I hadn't set out to intentionally sabotage my marriage. As my relationship with Jeremy continued, he too began to notice the cracks in our facade. He picked up on the fact that I never posted about him on social media, and I always seemed hesitant to go out in public with him. I tried to brush it off, blaming my behavior on being introverted, but even I knew that excuse could only hold out for so long. The truth was, I was scared. Scared of what people would think if they found out about us. Scared of the consequences of my actions. Scared of facing the reality of what I had done. So, I kept Jeremy at arm's length, hoping to shield him from the fallout of my mistakes. But in doing so, I only succeeded in pushing him further away, driving yet another wedge between us. My husband began to spend more time at home, and I felt the rift between Jeremy and me widening. With my husband's increased presence, it became impossible for Jeremy to come over, and I couldn't sneak off to see him like before. He grew frustrated, sensing that something was off, and pressed me for answers. Desperate to keep up the facade, I spun lie after lie, telling Jeremy that my parents were around and they didn't know about our relationship yet. I claimed they wouldn't approve, using them as a shield to deflect his questions. But even I knew that excuse had a shelf life. You can only use the same lie so many times before it starts to unravel. The atmosphere at home got tense. My husband could sense something was off, and it put a strain on our relationship. Meanwhile, Jeremy was getting frustrated with my excuses and evasions. He couldn't understand why I was pulling away from him. I felt like I was walking on eggshells, trying to keep everyone happy while hiding the truth. But deep down, I knew it was only a matter of time before everything came crashing down. It was the classic move that my husband used in catching me. My husband checked my phone. I had grown complacent, not just in my marriage, but also in my affair with Jeremy. I didn't even bother deleting our conversations, and that's how my husband discovered the truth. He went through my phone while I was asleep, taking pictures of our conversations and sending them to himself. But he never said a word to me about it. Instead, he started acting strangely cheerful and began spending even more time at home. It was like he was setting a trap, waiting for me to fall into it. He started encouraging me to go out more, which only added to my suspicion that he knew about Jeremy. But I played along, pretending like everything was normal, all the while feeling like I was walking on thin ice. I convinced myself that my husband was clueless about my affair. After all, he was the type to confront issues head-on rather than beat around the bush, a trait I admired about him. I figured if he knew, he'd address it directly. But boy, was I wrong. I started going out more, telling my husband I was hanging with friends, even though I didn't have many. Instead, I was spending all my time with Jeremy. We grew close again, and I apologized for my absence, blaming it on my strict parents and an overbearing brother who wouldn't approve of him. Jeremy, being the sweetheart he was, accepted my excuses and suggested we hang out at his place instead. This routine went on for a week or two. I'd visit Jeremy's place a few times a week, slipping further into the web of deceit I'd spun. But one day, as I returned home, I noticed my husband's car in the driveway, yet he wasn't inside. Curious, I looked over to our neighbor's house, only to see my husband stepping out. That's when I knew my charade was over and I had fucked up. The sight of my husband emerging from our neighbor's house, wearing a smirk on his face, sent a chill down my spine. Our neighborhood was known for its exclusivity and affluent residents, where everyone kept to themselves, too posh or rich to bother with neighborly interactions. It was a place where gossip rarely spread beyond closed doors. Given the lack of any apparent connection between my husband and our neighbor, the scene seemed suspicious. They had never exchanged more than a passing greeting, and there was no reason for my husband to be visiting her house. Yet there he was, with that telltale smirk plastered on his face. In that moment, my gut instinct kicked in, and I knew something was amiss. It was as if a veil had been lifted, revealing the truth I had been desperately trying to ignore. My husband's behavior betrayed him, and I couldn't shake the feeling that he was hiding something from me. Without hesitation, I marched up to my husband to confront him. I demanded to know why he was leaving our neighbor's house, but he just smirked and stayed silent. He tried to brush past me, but I stood my ground, blocking his path and pressing him for answers. Finally, he met my gaze and calmly confessed that he had been at our neighbor's house to do the same things I did at Jeremy's house. I was stunned into silence. Panic flooded my mind as realization dawned on me. My husband knew about Jeremy. Every thought screamed in my head, "My husband knows about Jeremy. My husband knows about Jeremy." I felt a sinking sensation in the pit of my stomach. I was in deep trouble. My husband remained eerily calm, dropping the bombshell that he had been aware of my affair for some time. With a composed demeanor, he brushed past me and entered the house, leaving me standing there in shock. Feeling completely screwed, I knew I had to confront my husband. So I followed him back inside and found him in the study. With tears welling up, I asked him how long he'd been seeing the neighbor. His response hit me hard. He admitted they'd been together as long as I'd been with Jeremy. It was like a punch in the gut. I then pressed him on how long he'd known about my affair. He dodged the question, but made it clear he had solid evidence of my cheating. My husband stared at me dead on, his tone serious. He said he wasn't going to waste time crying or yelling over my cheating. He'd already made up his mind that I wasn't worth it. He dropped the bomb. We were getting divorced, and I had 10 minutes to grab my stuff and get out. As I cried, hoping for some empathy, he stayed stone-faced. He warned me that if I didn't hurry, I'd be leaving with nothing but the clothes on my back. I made the decision to leave without a fuss. I didn't want any drama with my husband or the neighbors. Even though it was a quiet area, I knew things could get messy if security had to intervene. So I gathered my belongings and packed them up. My husband reminded me that the car was his, so I couldn't take it. I didn't argue. Instead, I ordered an Uber. With nowhere else to go, I realized I still had Jeremy as my backup plan. I leaned on Jeremy, knowing he'd offer me refuge. I concocted a lie about a heated argument with my parents and elder brother, claiming they'd kicked me out of the house they bought for me. It was a fabricated story, but I needed Jeremy to take me in. With no job and no savings, I was completely reliant on someone else's support to get back on my feet. As a stay-at-home wife who hadn't worked since college, I had no other options. In a cruel twist of fate, I soon found out my husband had beaten me to the punch. Before I even reached Jeremy's doorstep, my phone started ringing incessantly. It was Jeremy, and he knew everything. My husband had reached out to him and spilled the beans. Jeremy was devastated. He felt betrayed and hurt that I had lied to him throughout our entire relationship. He made it clear he never wanted to see me again. Feeling utterly rejected and with nowhere else to turn, I instructed the Uber to take me to the nearest cheap motel. It was a humiliating blow, realizing I had nowhere to go and no one left to turn to. As if things couldn't get any worse, I arrived at the motel, paid the Uber fare, and checked in. But when I decided to check our joint bank account, well, his money technically, I was in for another shock. My husband had drained about 95% of the funds. Sure, it was his money, but considering he knew I was now homeless, leaving me with only a fraction of what was left felt like a cruel blow. It was barely enough to cover expenses for a month, leaving me in a precarious financial situation with no safety net to fall back on. To add insult to injury, my husband decided to go for the jugular and share screenshots of my conversations with Jeremy with everyone we knew. And when I say everyone, I mean everyone. My parents, my siblings, his siblings, our friends. The whole 9 yards. But in a twisted turn of events, I guess I should thank him. After my parents got wind of the mess I'd made, they were furious. I had shattered my marriage and brought shame upon our family. Despite their anger, though, they couldn't turn their backs on me. So, begrudgingly, they scraped together enough money to buy me a plane ticket back home. It's been about 2 weeks since everything fell apart, and my life is still far from normal. I've accepted the harsh reality that my husband won't ever take me back. I've come to terms with that. Jeremy has cut me off completely, blocking me on every social media platform. Now I find myself holed up with my parents in another state. My husband wasn't too pleased about me leaving town before our divorce was finalized, but honestly, I couldn't care less. He doesn't get to dictate my every move anymore. If it weren't for my parents taking me in, I'd be out on the streets. Speaking of my husband, he's made it clear he'll be sending divorce papers my way soon. It stings, but I can't say I didn't see it coming. Especially after he cleaned out almost all the money from our joint account. Money he earned, so I guess the money is his. He may have thought he had control over me, but he doesn't get to call the shots anymore. To top it all off, I've heard rumors that my husband is still seeing our neighbor. It's like a slap in the face knowing they're probably together now. Well, I say, screw them both. Honestly, living a double life might sound exciting, but it's a recipe for disaster. It's like walking a tightrope, always on the edge of things falling apart. Each lie piles up, burying the truth deeper and deeper. Looking back, it's clear where things went wrong. If only there had been honesty instead of sneaking around, maybe things would have turned out differently. But looking back just brings regrets, without changing a thing. So, to anyone tempted to lead a double life, think twice. The excitement isn't worth the pain it brings. Choose honesty, even when it's hard, and build relationships on trust and truth. It might not always be easy, but it's the only way to find real peace and happiness. And if you ever have any doubts and feel like cheating, just take a look at me. I would still be back at my husband's 7-bedroom house with a home theater and a pool if only I hadn't tried to live a double life.